Welcome to another episode of Hobby Time in the Murder Basement, where today I interview Kevin from KeFa Paint Studios. Such an awesome guy. We had a great talk. Take a look. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me in the Murder Basement today. We have Kevin here from KeFa Painting Studios, teaches classes and does commission painting online. Say hi to everybody.
Hi.
Hi. How are you doing today, buddy?
So far, so good. Living the dream here, the quarantine dream of, painting minis all day and playing video games when it's my turn with the PlayStation. So
there you go. I just realized that instead of Tangerine Dream, we need to start a synthwave soundtrack band called Quarantine Dream. That's just the best idea I think I've had this entire time, and it all came from you, sir. Thank you so much for joining me today. I think our lives have kind of orbited each other, and we've never had any real reason to talk. And so I'm thrilled that you reached out after I interviewed Nick from MinMax just to say hi and be a part of this, because that's what this whole thing is for. I'm trying to as Sam Lynn says, boost the signal for all of us painters out there who are the journeymen, the people doing it every single day, who may not be getting the best visibility, but also are on the upswing. I think it's really cool hearing our stories, and I really appreciate you for being a part of this.
I enjoy it. I enjoy talking about the hobby as much as I can. So having somebody that's willing to talk back is a nice change.
That is the real thing, man. I can talk to anybody all day long about this, but my wife can only hear so much. So, Kevin, how long have you been painting? How did you get into the hobby? What was your genesis, sir?
So, about 12 years old, a kid brought to school a little 2-page pamphlet, and it was something that you probably pick up for free off the counter at a game store. And it had Warhammer Fantasy inside. So it was just a 2-page pamphlet of Warhammer Fantasy, and inside was a double page photograph of a Warhammer Fantasy table with beautiful woods and a river and a bridge, and there was orcs and goblins invading the wood elf realm, and I saw all these models and the fantasy of it. And I just discovered Braveheart, the movie, and I loved everything about those mass battles, two mobs of guys charging towards each other. And I was like, oh yeah, sprinkle some goblins and dragons in there. This is definitely for me. So I was obsessed with it right away. I just had no way of getting money at the time. So me and my brother went around washing any car in our neighborhood. We'll wash any car for $1. And people would and they would be like, here's $5. You know what I mean? They would usually give us more than $1, but we were just like, yeah, we'll wash any car for $1. And we were like, nobody says no if you only tell them it's $1. And then sometimes you get more. We would wash cars all day and then have $30. And then so I went and bought my first model. Some local friends were like, we want to play 40K, not fantasy. And I was like, that's disappointing, but if that's what everybody wants to do, we'll do that. So my first model I ever painted was a Ragnar Blackmane, and I wish I still had it. I really do. I would love to see how terrible it was,
Yeah, right.
Got the name Ragnar on his sword, and I do remember copying that from the picture in the book onto my model, and the one in the magazine only took up half of the blade or something, and mine was from the base to the tip Ragnar, Yeah. So I was like, got it on. It's kind of the same, you know. But I was just a little kid. I had no idea. I was just coloring, you know, with paint.
Of course. Well, it's amazing that you started trying things like that at that age, because I've met a lot of really young painters here, and while they are like way braver than some of the older people, like they aren't trying to like write on things or anything like that.
Well, I'm really good with reference material, so just if I didn't see that already, I would have never thought to do it.
Sure.
When I got a little older, I got my first job, and it was like every payday I would hit one of our local game shops and pick up a. Back in the day, you used to be able to get a box of 20 skeleton warriors for $20 for Warhammer Fantasy.
Right.
Could you imagine that? Now they're like what, 10 for 50 or something? But
Yeah.
I would go get
Their pricing is a little absurd right now.
I would go get a mob of skeletons or zombies for my vampire counts army, and I would spend all week painting them. And you know, it was just we didn't have washes back then, or at least I didn't know what a wash was. So it was just base coat and dry brush.
Right.
Everything. You know?
And you can get so much done with that. I have a buddy who he showed me his old Skaven army, and it was pre-washes and all of that, and it was just base coat, highlight, dry brush, and it's like, dude, looks pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, they work for tabletop. You know,
Of course.
a dry brushed army is 1,000 times better than an unpainted army. But yeah, I did just armies, just Warhammer Fantasy for about a decade, maybe longer than that, because I mean, there was a lot of years where I really wanted to do it and just had no money. I was a kid, you know.
Sure.
But luckily, my wife, she's a huge nerd too, so she played Warhammer. I just had to paint everything, and she'll play. And then now she plays D&D with me like every weekend. So bonus if you got something like that at home.
Right.
But so I was always just concerned with getting our models on the table so we could play games. And it wasn't until I went to a couple of tournaments that had like best single model and best painted army that I started thinking like, oh, I think I could do that, or I could at least try harder, you know? And then
Sure.
So it's always been about winning prizes for me. It's just, it's a little bit of validation for all the time I spend by myself in this room. It's like, no, I want some like ribbons to hang on the wall or something, you know?
Yeah. Dude, I'm right there with you. They're like, validation from your peers only gets you so far. You know, like if you feel good that night, but looking at that stuff later on, even if it just becomes junk in your life, like there's something pretty special about it.
Yeah, and like once I paint, I don't get too attached to my models. I know the value that they have, so I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not just gonna give them away or something. I'd rather have them in my case to look at than do that. But
Of course.
I'm okay if someone made an offer on one of my pieces. I have no problem letting it go. But the trophies mean a lot to me, like the awards and stuff I remember. Even if I don't have the piece anymore, I'm like, I know exactly what.
Right. Well, that's I mean, I think that's really cool though, because like I'm not super sentimental about things either, and then the older I get, the less sentimental I am. Even though like I've got a stupid hoard of plastic that I'm sitting on that would argue otherwise. You know, like it just doesn't matter that much as we would like to say that like this piece is going to forever be like the piece that you did the best. I've always been under the mentality that you know, coming from a music background, I have yet to write my best song. It doesn't matter. Like the next song is always the step towards the next best thing, and I'll never hit that apex because it's about the journey. It's not about the like the actual piece. The actual piece is just a stepping stone to get to that enlightenment of exploration.
So I've always heard from other artists, especially like I've never been competitive to a point where like it's detrimental to my mental health or anything, where you know I don't but it is important to me to compete, and I at least want to be like, you know, in the ballpark.
Sure.
So a lot of friends would tell me like, oh, it's about the journey, not the destination. Don't worry about stuff like that. And I'm like, but I do worry about it. Like it's what's important to me. The competition, you know. But I have reached the point where I realized my first Adepticon, the last Adepticon, there were so many super high level pieces there that I realized, oh, like you hear art is objective. You really can't, you know, depend on, like, it doesn't matter what the judges say. Art is objective. And you're like, yeah, right. The one that wins is the best. But when you get to a certain point, there were so many spectacular pieces in those cases. That's when I really opened my eyes, when I realized, like, oh, art only gets to a certain level and then it becomes completely objective, right? So up to a certain level, it takes, you know, there are different levels of skill. But once you reach, you know, that apex of artistic skill, then it just becomes less about the mechanics and more about the vision and the emotion that it can evoke.
Yeah, absolutely. So you and I first competed at Warfare Weekend in November, which I thought was really awesome because I remember seeing your name there, and you know, I had seen, you know, pictures and saw that you were teaching classes, and I never really thought that I would get to a point where I would be able to compete with people that are like way better than me, because I instantly kind of got to a plateau really fast here in St. Louis, where there are a couple painters that are absolutely way better than me, and you know, and some those like basement dwellers that come out of nowhere and just blow you away. But for the most part, in the gaming zone, like, I don't paint full big armies. Like, I will, but it's not my favorite thing. I like doing, you know, stuff like this dude, where it's just like I get, you know, real gnarly on one big piece that I'm just having fun with. And so it was cool taking that to Warfare Weekend, seeing your pieces in the case, and realizing, especially when you see people like, you know, Chris Surrey, like, who is painting to that like way next tier of painting, you know, all these are just pieces of plastic with acrylic paint on them. Like, there isn't really anything super special about what any one person does. It's their understanding and their narrative that they're telling, and that is when I started realizing that, like, my next step was going to be, you know, not just like who gets the most perfect blends. It's how is this piece going to be something that it impacts me later on, or impacts someone else? Because you know, I think as a collective, we've all been kind of working in the zone of craft and trade when it comes to painting models. But I think we're actually finally starting to see people, you know, transcend that to where these little tiny pieces of plastic and resin are now like little tiny sculptures that can be super impactful. And that's something that I didn't expect to have come out of Warfare Weekend. I walked away from that, actually, instead of feeling like really accomplished, feeling like, oh shit, like I've got a huge step. Like, this is the next thing here, which is really weird.
That's a really good place to start. Like, Warfare Weekend, there was a couple of really sharp competitors there, and it was a pretty small field. There was a ton of gamers around. We tried to encourage everybody to enter something. Yeah. But yeah, that was like the lowest tier of competition, like regionally, that I've seen. So, like, start from there and then work your way up to like Gen Con, some of these others, and then if we get something like Golden Demon, which was supposed to be last month, or, you know, that would have been crazy to see the first Golden Demon in almost a decade. I wanted to be a part of it so bad.
Dude, same, man. And like, I feel so bad. Like, I didn't finish my Golden Demon. I realized that I would rather aim for like the $3,000 resin beast prize than I was a Golden Demon. but I wanted to see all that stuff. I wanted to see it in person. I wanted to meet the artists. I wanted to hopefully sit down with Peachy and be like, dude, what's going on?
Who's that?
Peachy, you know, from the Warhammer TV tutorials, just because he seems like a super sweet guy. So, but, you know, I don't know, like that. I was really excited for Adepticon this year, and I'm pretty bummed that we weren't able to go.
Yeah, we just got to look forward to the next one. And on the bright side, neither one of us missed out on a Golden Demon opportunity, so now we can just work on something for the next one. I'm sure they'll be back.
Oh, they absolutely will be. And I mean, like, I think Games Workshop's going to be one of those. It's going to be weird watching Games Workshop over the next 5 years, because if Eisenhorn comes out and does what I think it's going to do to Warhammer, they are going to have to. There's going to be a reckoning there of price and accessibility that they are going to have to tackle, because you know, they are going to. It's going to be hard to get people into the price of like a new Bone Reaper army or a new Sisters of Battle army or something like that. That's going to be a bridge that they are going to have to actually like deal with, which I think is only going to be better for painting competitions and just like you and me having fun with like fellow painters and hobbyists, because there'll be a whole new influx of people who will be all bright-eyed and like dreamy about their like narrative that they're building on their table that, you know, we weren't seeing before. And so I hope that GW's up to the challenge, because I don't think they understand what they're going to do to themselves.
Well, I'm looking forward to the old world stuff. I don't know what it is yet, you know, but if it's anything like what I used to have, then I'm excited.
You're excited. Well, the funny thing is, like, I think my first introduction to Warhammer was very similar. There was a local family that they were Mormon, and I only say that because I was surprised that they had like 18 kids and they still could afford Warhammer. I was like, I had no idea what they did for money, but they brought in like one of those old Citadel trades, and I remember seeing like the Wheel of Doom, the Skaven like Doom Rider thing where it's just a wheel full of rats, and I was like, oh, that's cool as hell. And I remember trying to get my mom to like be all right with spending $100 on a model for me to try to get into this game, and she was like, why don't you just stick with Magic the Gathering?
Yeah.
So how long did it take for you to realize that your painting skills were at a point where you could actually start like painting stuff for other people and you know, taking that just outside of like your own hobby into like a small business?
Okay, so it was a real struggle for me, because for most of the time that I played Warhammer Fantasy, I mean probably for like 15 years, I was the best miniature painter that I knew in real life. You know what I mean? So sure. It wasn't that I was great. I wasn't very good at all. But I just had no interaction with miniature painters that were better than me. Just a couple of other guys that painted tabletop, and I quickly outgrew everybody around me. So it wasn't until... All right, so I painted a unit of... they were Saurus Warriors back then. I don't know what they're called now. Seraphim Warriors or something. And I was like, I'm going to paint these to the absolute best of my ability. And I spent like a month painting a unit of 20 Saurus Warriors. And then when I went to spray the clear coat on them, they frosted and were ruined. And I put my brushes down. I didn't paint again for like 3 years. I was just like, fuck this. I don't know if I should swear, but
do what you do.
It just comes out.
Yeah.
I gave up on painting. I was so heartbroken. I was just like, why do I waste my time? You know, I spent so much time and energy, and I had to, I don't know. When I picked up the brushes again, I was surprised that not only did I not lose a step, but I felt like I was painting even better than I was before. So then I was like, oh man, I wonder. I you always use social media to promote, like, I told you I was a pro wrestler for a while. So I would use social media to promote my dates and stuff like that. But I never thought about like looking for Warhammer stuff or painting groups, right? So once I discovered like the heavier metal Facebook group, and there's another one, miniature painting tips and tricks. Once I discovered those Facebook groups, I was like, oh, it was like going to art college. I mean, the internet was a game changer. And I told you how much I hate computers. I never had a functioning computer with internet in my house until like my mid-20s. Like I never bothered with computers. I was just like, no, I just need a PlayStation. I'll get by, whatever.
Right.
So once I started joining these groups, and I would paint something and post a picture, and I'm like, what do you guys think? And they're like, you're shit at taking pictures. Like, that's what we think. And I'm like, oh, okay, what do I do different? And so then I learned how to take better pictures. Then I got better feedback, and then I could improve on things. And I quickly, once I got excited about it again, it was like, all right, now I need to go buy stuff. I need paint. I need, more models, etc. And at the time, I wasn't in a position where I could just like buy models whenever I wanted. So I started telling people like, yeah, I'll paint your models on commission or whatever. I remember the first job I did, someone hired me to paint 3 sets of the Shadows of Brimstone board game. And they're like, how much to do that? And I was like, man, it's going to be a lot, like $600. And so I painted over 100 models for $600. And when I got the commission, I thought it was a good deal. And by the end, I was like, oh man, I've got to figure this out. Like, this is so like he paid me no problem, and I was able to get a bunch of hobby stuff and supplies and like paint racks and stuff. But then more people started, when I posted like, yeah, I painted this on commission, more people started reaching out to me. And just like I heard Nicole saying, when people are telling you yes all the time, you just got to raise your prices. So if I was more than a couple of weeks booked, or if it was something I didn't want to paint, I would just say some outrageous number. And if they still said yes, then I'm like, oh, okay, then I guess that's my new number. And it's what I've always done. Now I'm at the point where I scare a good amount of people away with sticker shock, and I'm okay with that because I know what my time is worth. And I can make, if we were working at the moment, I could make just as much or more money at the factory, with a little bit of overtime than I could painting some models that I don't want to paint. So a lot of times I'll tell people no. Like if they've got something that doesn't interest me, then I'm just like, I don't want to spend the next 20 hours of my life working on that,
Yeah.
But here lately, I've been a lot less picky, and I've been having a really good time because I'm not exhausted from working. I work the night shift normally, so I've been waking up early and painting for 4 or 6 hours every day and hanging out with the family. We've been cooking a lot of like homemade pizzas, homemade bread. So we've been having a really good time with this quarantine. I know a lot of people are struggling, so I feel like I can't talk about it, but like I'm having the time of my life over here.
I actually think that it's refreshing to hear that something really good is coming out of this for you. Not to say that I am downplaying anybody else's misery, because we all feel this totally different. But whatever you feel is valid. Like that is something that, like, my wife and I, we haven't had a vacation in 2 years. Last year was so busy, I wasn't able to leave my job. I'm a small business owner, and so like this is the first time that we've like sat down and talked in like 2 years, it feels like. And while it would be nice to not just be like stuck farting into our couches all the time, it's been actually really sweet. And so what, once the like initial depression went away of like losing my job and my business and my community, like I've had actually a pretty good time as well. And I'm hearing a lot of people past that initial shock feel very similar, which is refreshing, because I think that if we were all just miserable, this would be a pretty unhealthy environment right now, especially since we're all on social media and doing stuff like that. The way I've been on Facebook way more than I want to be, but it's all been pretty good stuff.
I don't know what the math is, but I know they say a large number of relationships end after they go on vacation together for the first time. This is the first time that they really spend like 5 whole days together or something. So my wife and I couldn't be happier to be locked in a house together. So I mean, at least that's how I genuinely feel. You'd have to ask her, but I think we're doing good.
Yeah, I think that it's probably a safe bet that you guys are in the same zone. And I've had multiple friends lose, get back from a long weekend vacation, and be like, man, I got to break up with her. I'm like, yeah, we've been saying that for a long time. So you started doing commissions and stuff. And I think the first time I heard about you was your painting classes. And I think you were doing maybe busts or something of that nature. How did you take that step? Because painting for tabletop, painting commissions is very different than doing, or at least for me, it feels different than doing like display work and then also figuring out how to like articulate that to a new audience. That I have a huge problem like articulating how to do things, because I just come from a very different background.
So I realized that while I was working on commissions, I would stay booked so far ahead that when it came time for competition season, I would struggle to get my competition pieces done. Not only that, I'm still to this day one of those guys that will try to enter something in every category. And I've been told, like, I've got a lot of advice from friends that are like, just pick the thing and focus on the thing, right? Which is what I did for Adepticon. All I was taking with me was my creature caster piece to enter, and I worked super hard on her, and I was super proud of it. Hopefully, I'll get to show it off at Gen Con. But so I realized that I was losing time on the display pieces working on commissions, and that it was not making me happy to paint tabletop stuff when I really wanted to be painting to the best of my ability. And no one was paying me, for the hours that it would take to paint at like my highest level for commissions.
Right.
So for over a year, I hung a sign on my Facebook page that was like, commissions are closed. I'm not doing it anymore. And I only exclusively painted display pieces and competition pieces for about a year. And it had an explosion of growth, or at least in my portfolio, right? Because I knew that I was capable of this all along. I tell my wife, it's like the piece is trapped in my paintbrush. It's like the models are trapped in my brush. I can't get them out until I can get through all this shit that I don't want to be painting right now.
Right.
And so once I finally have time to sit down with a clean piece and a clean palette and my paintbrushes, then I can really find out what I was capable of. And I had a lot of people complimenting me like, oh, wow, you've gotten a lot better. And I'm like, not really. You're just now seeing what I've been capable of for a long time.
Right.
And so I struggle with, am I grinding or am I growing, right? And if I feel that I'm not growing, then I'll change gears drastically and figure it out, because I never want to, I don't want to be one of those people that just reaches a comfort space and stays there. And that's fine. Like, I know a lot of people, they don't have the desire to be like, best in show, number one, everything. Like, I'm just hungry for it, so I keep on pushing in that direction. Maybe I'll never get there, but as long as I'm always taking steps in the correct direction, then I'm usually pretty satisfied with my work.
Yeah. So did you have like formal art training after high school or anything like that?
I was a terrible art student in school because they didn't want to work on the things I wanted to work on. And now I see the same thing with my oldest daughter. She's very talented, not doing super hot in art class. And I'm like, hey, like maybe some of this other stuff will, it'll come in handy later. Like just do the work. But You were asking me how I got into teaching classes.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I realized when I went to Gen Con that I didn't think the classes, they didn't look anything that I couldn't handle teaching. And I was teaching classes locally. I organized a class for Sergio here in my hometown and for Matt DePietro. I try to fly artists in and put them up in my house for the weekend, and then they teach classes here, and then get them back on the plane and send them out. And in exchange for organizing everything, giving them a place to stay, feeding them, I usually take the class for free. That way I can afford to take these, several $100 painting classes that I wouldn't ordinarily be able to take.
Right.
So once I started, I was already doing the work for other people. So then I was like, well, maybe I can do it on a smaller scale. So I would charge a lot less, only make it, 4 or 8 hours instead of a whole weekend, and try to find something that I can help people with, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've got a few different classes that I've nailed down, but the reality is everybody, when they first start out, feels like an imposter, and I'm certainly no exception. When first time I was standing in a crowded room full of other painters, that were teaching classes at Gen Con, I was like, oh man, I'm not supposed to be here. But by the end of the weekend, I realized I was, just as capable of this as anybody else. And then what really got me hooked, so Jose Castillo and I did 14 classes together at Gen Con last year. We split the workload, and
Wow.
we busted our asses, and we're still planning on doing it again this year. Only we're not doing them together. I'm doing 14 and he's doing 14. So we're gonna do some work that weekend as long as everything goes off. But the last day of Gen Con, I scheduled for both of us a one-on-one painting coaching session. And I charged a little more for it, and I was like, I don't know if anybody else signed up for it, but we'll just try it. And we both of our classes got booked. And while I was teaching that in that intimate setting, without the craziness of no sleep and people coming in, collecting tickets, et cetera, that was all a bit formulaic after the first couple of classes. It was like, okay, do this. But once I got to the one-on-one class, I realized that by breaking down what I was telling him to do, I was gaining a better understanding of it myself. So then I was like, oh, teaching others makes me a better painter. and once you're forced to explain why do you do the things you do, and then you run into the mistakes that you make, right? So for example, when I came to Detroit to teach that intro to bus class, our friend Neil Duffy, he ran into a problem with the color that he was using. He wasn't able to influence it the way that I was asking everyone to. And it wasn't until I got all the way back home and got some sleep, because I was teaching that class on about 2 hours of sleep per night for the past 2 nights because of my third shift sleep schedule, trying to change my sleep schedule, driving all the way to Detroit with no sleep, trying to sleep that night, and still, because my body doesn't sleep at night.
Right.
So I was exhausted teaching that class, and it wasn't until I got home and got some sleep, and then I woke up and I messaged him, and I was like, hey, we have to, instead of treating that color like a flesh tone, we need to treat that color just like we would a monster flesh tone and desaturate it with a brown or something before we start trying to influence it with other colors. And once we did that, it worked fine. So when I explain my process out loud to other people, I'm forced to confront the problems with my process and figure out how to overcome.
Yeah. Well, that always has been, my problem with teaching people is I didn't do any college. My art background comes from being around artists in my frame shop, which is not exactly fair to a lot of people because I have to interact with them in a very different manner, and sometimes it's really harsh. It's because they don't want you to kiss their ass. They don't want any fan service or bullshit. They just want it straight. And so we get really intense and granular over looking over their pieces, trying to figure out what's worth framing, what's worth enhancing, what's worth doing all that stuff. And so when I'm working with like people here in a one-on-one, we usually can get there. But in a group setting, I find myself being like really hard to focus. I don't paint particularly well in those situations. I mainly just talk, and I sit and go, well, I'm not getting anything done today, but at least I'm helping other people out and mentally doing the hoop jump, which does help actually quite a bit. But you know, I when I see people like you doing these classes, I'm always like, how did you like break through that? Because I don't like multitask well enough to do that right now.
The trick, all right, so public speaking is definitely going to come up if you're teaching classes. But like I said, I've been working in a factory for like 13 years. I did a couple of years as team leader. I was in charge of 40 plus team members, so I had to give briefings to them every morning and speak out loud, like, plus the wrestling background, being in front of an audience, sometimes in my underwear. Never being the center of attention is not a problem for me.
Of course.
Usually I'm a good speaker. I have been known to like be overconfident and then trip myself up, like, oh, I got this, and then I'm like, oh, I have no idea what I'm going to say. But the trick that I find is that you have to meet each student where they are. So you can't just blanket advice, a group of 10 people. I make sure that I go around and spend one-on-one time with every single student. My goal is not for them to paint like me at the end of the class. My goal is for them to paint something better than they thought they were capable of painting at the end of the class, right. Whatever that is to them. I've had some students especially that Detroit class was loaded with really talented artists. I had Mike Disney in there, Neil Duffy, Nicole, and some others, and some of the guys I didn't know really were impressing me. You know what I mean? And so I was like, when I was walking around looking at some of their early stuff, I was like, okay, I got to bring it today. Like, I got to really give them something new. Yeah. Some of these classes, they're like, yeah, I went and bought these brushes so I could take this class. And I'm like, don't worry, I got you. Like, I can help those people 100% of the time. I can help them become a better painter. But when you've got somebody who's got years of experience, sometimes it's a little intimidating for me. But I'm just like, okay, I always just have to analyze all the things that I've done over the years, and I can usually find something new to give to them so that they walk away that they're learning and growing. Well,
and all of us painters, no matter at what level our like focus is, we're just people, and we're trying to get the exercise in, and so that was like the cool thing, seeing everybody at Warfare Weekend, because like that is such a small like festival that's way more about like playing War Machine and stuff like that. But it brought in really good artists and really cool people, and I realized like the starfucker mentality doesn't apply here either. Just because you have been lusting after people's minis on Instagram doesn't mean that you're going to have the same sort of reaction when you meet them in person. And that was a really cool experience for me, just kind of being part of it, being around it, and it made me realize that anytime I can take a class, I probably should, just to keep this thing working, instead of getting all stuck in my way. It's always nice interacting with other people, and also I took a bunch of classes with Lauren Fahey, and she was great. Like, I was really impressed with the way that she handled everybody, but she was like really fast painting, and everybody around me was going really slow. And I'm a pretty fast painter because of the commission background, and I spent the rest of the class like helping everybody around me, and that felt really good to like let her focus on teaching the class, but like helping the close proximity get better. And that was a new experience for me as well.
That's a lot of the reason Jose and I partnered up, is because both of us were like, we weren't 100% sure that we could do it, So we were like, well, at least we'll have each other to fall back on. And the whole weekend went great. And we both realized that, like, okay, we can definitely do this. So I look forward to seeing, what classes he's going to be doing in the future. I know he taught some classes at a local convention here a couple months ago. So we're just always doing something.
That's really exciting. So what's going to be the future? Do you think you'll ever get to a point with your commissioned studio that you'll do that full time, or do you kind of have the right balance between work and fun time now?
Well, there's always been like a gap, right? And it's always going to be a leap of faith to leave a secure job that I've had for a long time to do this full time.
It's called health insurance. I'm right there with you.
Well, yeah, not only the insurance, but just so I do pretty good at commissions, but I'm like, how much more could I get if I didn't spend 8 hours a day doing some terrible job that I don't want to do? And they're forcing me right now to take that leap of faith in a small, this is like a trial, right? Like a free, no consequences, like give it a shot and see what happens. And to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know if I have to go back to work.
Really? That's very exciting.
I'm doing okay. But will I continue to do okay? You know what I mean? Over another month, over 6 months, or did I just get lucky? And it's really hard to say. It's hard to say with such a small sample size of time. But for now, I will go back to work. But I feel like I could probably pull this off.
Well, that's exciting, and I being self-employed, I'm as much as I love it, I'm going to say that was one of the hardest mental leaps I've ever had to do, because I grew up in small businesses, and my family, well, not being bad at it, that would be a misnomer. I think a lot of people didn't understand what it took and the gambles that they had to make just to make like payroll at the end of the week and stuff like that. I realized that I didn't want to play the game that way. If I'm going to do this, I have to make money. This thing has to be solid. And so I made a couple really intense blanket statements to say that this has to operate this certain way. And that with that level of dedication and focus, I think you're about able to achieve just about anything. But that by no stretch of the imagination was it easy. I mean, and there's a lot of people now that's like, you're living the dream. I'm like, dude, you don't understand. In the course of the last 10 years, I've had to pay myself only 9 of those years. So there's an entire year in there that like I just had to like come up with extra money somehow, and that's not something that everybody is really willing to take those steps and the sacrifice that comes with it. It's a really interesting world, and I hope people have much more respect and understanding for people who do branch out on their own through this, because it takes a whole different mentality. There was something that you said earlier, and I wanted to swing back around to it, and then I went on my tirade about small business. Oh yes, so part of the future of operating on your own, and you kind of glanced on hating computers earlier, as we're doing this conversation on your cell phone. Content creation. What the fuck does that mean in the future? Because I am so confused by how many people are doing it, what platforms to do it on, how to go. What's your mentality? What's your outlook on it right now?
So admittedly, I'm probably well behind the curve on this, because I'm a painter first, and all this other stuff is secondary, and I'm just trying to be a part of the team, in a lot of ways. So Facebook is still the here and now as far as commission painting and anything profitable, I think, for most of us, right? There are some exceptions, obviously, with the super successful Patreons and YouTube channels, but I think they are very much the minority. I know, like, the joke is, you know, that Facebook's for old people or whatever, but
Yeah.
old people are the ones with money.
Yeah.
A lot of my best clients are in their 50s or over, and they still love fantasy miniatures. They still love Dungeons and Dragons, etc. They still love playing war games with their friends. And then I always try to keep a toe in the future too. So, like, recently, my daughter freaked out when she saw that I made a couple of TikTok videos just with like a rotating stand in my miniatures, and it seems to be going okay. Like, I can't really be bothered to do that all the time, but I know that it's important because those kids are gonna grow up. You know what I mean? And
Of course.
like, TikTok's been a thing for a lot of years now. It's not like it's a brand new thing. So some of those kids are already growing up. It's just about being exposed to as broad an audience as you can, right? So you just plant as many seeds as you can, and then hopefully some business will grow out of it. So I do a little bit of like Facebook and Instagram, still probably number one. Try to do Twitter. I'm not great at Twitter. I think I have 101 followers, and I've got like a couple thousand on Facebook. So there's a real I don't know if it's a lack of effort on my part. I can't be bothered to be on Twitter all day retweeting stuff and like, look at me. I post my work one time. I think it just rolls right through people's news feed, and then I don't know what happened. Like, I don't know how to make Twitter work. I know how to make Facebook work. I don't know.
To make Twitter work, you have to tag the President of the United States of America, and you got to get him to like shit on you or retweet you. Like, it seems like that's the only time I'm ever seen anybody getting, or a cat doing something really badass. Otherwise, like, Twitter to me, my band never took off on Twitter at all. Like, and I interacted, I worked hard at it, and I was like, this is stupid. And Facebook, it didn't take off. It was, just being part of like Bandcamp and SoundCloud. That was like the things where people like interacted with me. And I was like, this is weird. This is not the place where I would expect. And it makes me wish I would have done YouTube sooner, because I think that the market is super saturated right now in like people doing my style of music. And I just don't want to try to cut through the noise there.
So, yeah, and just today I uploaded my very first Twitch videos. So I don't know when this will go live, but it's KeFa Paint Studios with capital KPS with no spaces. And I don't know, if this gets uploaded in the next 14 days, then I guess you can still see the very beginning of the project I'm working on now, which is a giant dragon diorama from Dark Sword Miniatures. And it is a commission, and I'll be working on it for the next 40 working hours of my life. So I'm very excited about it. I love working on all things Dungeons and Dragons. So yeah, anyone who wants to join me on that adventure and check it out, I definitely need to get that ball rolling. I'm already behind, on the Twitch channel stuff, but I will get it figured out. I'm a little stubborn about doing it, but I'm at home with no excuses, so here I go.
Right. Well, and I think that has been kind of like the best point, and especially for self-starters right now, we are finding ourselves being like, well, I literally have no excuse anymore. I have to focus on this, and
right.
And that I really appreciate, even though it's not as I don't know. It's hard to say. I've found myself not having a lot of fun painting recently. That's why I've been having more fun doing this, talking with painters, and trying to psych myself back up. And that's been really special, because I don't know about you, but I found that this community is probably the only community where I've ran into where most people have the same sort of mentality and the same like level of commitment to these worlds, these things that don't exist in the real world. Like it all feels like we're part of something that I never got from music, and in any of my other hobbies, it's never really taken off. everybody seems to be the right amount of extrovert and introvert, and in the same amount of creatives. It's really special, and I really appreciate being a part of this now, because I actually kind of feel like I've made it. I'm in that group of people that I like to hang out with.
Well, I think miniature painting as a hobby is so attractive to introverts because it is escapism. Those of us that have a bit of that extrovert in us, we're the ones that are out there making videos and posting online and making conversations and teaching classes. So of course we're the ones that find each other and have all this in common. But I still think there are a huge, probably even larger number of people who just lurk and look at stuff online and watch our videos and stuff like that. So anytime we can get that audience interacting with us, I think we're being successful, because that's why we're stepping out, is because we want to have those interactions with artists and stuff and draw them out of their shells a little bit. And we see that there are a wide degree of people in the hobby, but I think all of us are a little bit introverted and extroverted, because I think to be successful at this, you have to spend a lot of time alone.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement.
And then,
it's like I find a lot of people being I don't know. I think people need to be able to sit in their like brain stew a little bit better. I think that it's healthier than just being like turned on all the time by social media or by TV. And there's something about focusing and that like transitive state that you kind of get into from painting miniatures that is really unlike anything I have ever done before, next to shrooms, which is not something that I just say that everybody should go out and try hallucinogens casually, especially in our 30s. It doesn't make any sense to do it all the time anymore. So, there's definitely some benefits, like actual like therapeutic benefits of focusing in, learning what you do, getting all right with being quiet. It's reinvigorated my love of music, specifically metal. Like I got to the point where I didn't want to listen to heavy metal anymore, and now I am like, yeah, I'm totally going to listen to this old Anthrax album, and I'm going to paint for the next hour.
And it's surprisingly calming, right? Like turn on some metal and paint, and you're not like amped up by the music. You're just like relaxed and in the zone. It's almost just like your brain needs something unique to get in its calm, quiet place.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And I've always been like a metal fan, an extreme music fan, and I've found myself, like, as I get back to it now, just like there's been so much like good music over the last 10 years that I just missed, because like I was like doing really bizarre like modular synth music, which is maybe not the most fun to listen to, but it's also very good to paint too. And like chip tunes, I was really big into chip tunes for a while, and but like coming back to metal, it's been really good. So we've got the focus of your Twitch coming up. You're going to be teaching classes once this pandemic dies down. Hopefully Gen Con still goes on, although like if I was you, I would probably be preparing what happens if that doesn't. What's going to be your...
I said if it doesn't happen, then I just sit on all this stuff till next year. Like I live right down the road from Gen Con, so I'll be here when Gen Con's ready.
Oh, okay. So you're in Indianapolis?
Just outside of it, yeah.
Nice. Then we're not too far away, like a good half a day's drive.
Yeah, I'm in the drive.
Yeah. Well, that's something that I've been wanting to do here, is get more regional painters to come through. We've got Shoshi that's really close. And I'd like to start getting St. Louis to like step it up, because I want to see things like Warfare Weekend like actually like bring it, because I know that there's people here. And like I was entering a Warhammer model into a War Machines focused convention, and like all my friends who played Warhammer hadn't even heard of this convention. I was like, dude, like there's an opportunity for like massive growth then, if like half of the population hasn't even heard of it. So I don't know. It's
You got one of the coins from the competition, right?
Yes, I got large monster.
Okay, and those coins were fantastic. And not only that, the Best in Show award, that plaque with the ribbons on it, that's one of the coolest trophies I've ever seen. And I want to go back so that I can get one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They put a lot of effort into what ended up being a very small competition, but I would love to see it grow. It deserves to be bigger and better than it is. All of the people with their plastic toys are already at the convention. They just need to get them out of their box and take them to the competition case.
Yeah.
There's no reason that competition shouldn't be twice as big, this year.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm feeling. Do you think you're going to be teaching at Warfare Weekend again?
Oh, for sure. I've already booked my hotel.
Awesome. And are you going to be doing bus, or are you going to just do like what do you think your class is going to be?
It's really hard to say. Like I thought doing some Star Wars Legion stuff would be really hot last year, and I think maybe it was too specific. It was really hard to sell tickets. I barely broke even for the weekend. And it was like people were so focused on gaming that nobody was interested in painting almost. And all the people that were, I don't know. It was a tough sell. Like all the tournaments are going on at the same time as all the classes, and you can't really miss one round of a tournament to take a class.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I totally jumped out of a Warhammer Underworlds tournament because it's like, and I'm going to go learn how to paint metal right now. See you guys.
Right. Well, I think maybe bus will be a good way to go, because what I had before was game specific. So maybe my classes were interesting to all the people that were there to play Star Wars Legion. There was a whole room full of them, but they were playing in tournaments while the classes were going on. So I've got to do something a little less specific, and I think it'll do better. But I'm looking forward to going back and competing nonetheless.
Yeah, I think bus would be a really good fit. I would absolutely take that class, because I've got a couple busts, but I've actually never painted them. And I think having the motivation to bust that out would be really good. And
over here, like this shelf I've got, there you go. These are all the busts that I had prepped and ready to go for Adepticon, and we didn't make it. So I've got to. I still have to. I still have to send payment to the Blackheart Miniatures for the miniatures. They worked out a deal. I was supposed to pay them after the classes. None of us saw this coming. So I've got to use these busts somewhere and get this taken care of. So maybe I'll teach these at Warfare.
I think that would be really awesome, and I would, like I said, I would definitely take that class, because I think that would be a lot of fun, and hopefully, they understand. I'm sure everybody seems to be really understanding of where everybody's at financially because of this, because you guys all got hurt, the conventions all got hurt, like it was a massive swing, to the industry, and it didn't. It's not like you could like plan to run like buy insurance on every class and everything that you do, so you could make a claim on this. That isn't part of this community yet. Although after this, it might be something that we all have to consider. Just because having something like this happen is absolutely devastating.
There was. I know Sergio for sure, and maybe Banshee as well, had U.S. tours planned around Adepticon, and I mean, their flights were canceled, and they were told your tour is canceled. You know what I mean? And that I would love to see some sort of protection for them, for something like that. But unfortunately, it looks like they just got burned bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like traveling musicians, once you've hit a certain point, they have insurance on their tours, because if something happens, they get in a car wreck or break a leg, or anything lit happens like that, they have to protect themselves. And that's something that I don't know if we are there yet as a community, but I think that these should be things to be thought about. And I think people need to actually, like, when you say like $120 for like a painting class, like, to me that sounds like a bargain, with the amount of knowledge and know-how that's going into that. To me that sounds totally fine, but other people don't get it, and I'm like, where else are you going to spend that little amount of money for that much interaction? And most of the time it comes with a miniature along with it that's like generally like half the cost. When I see like Miniac doing his like $400 class, and not only do you get like a really beautiful sculpture, but you get his online courses and stuff like that too. That like 65 videos. That's a crazy value when you start thinking about that. And I hope that we're at that like tipping point on the seesaw where people start looking at these a little bit more holistically, instead of just being like, oh, that's just too much money. I'm like, but is it really too much money? I don't think it is.
I mean, they say that most Americans can't survive a $400 emergency. Like, they don't have the savings for that. So then, $250 class sounds kind of expensive.
Yeah, but how many of those people are playing Warhammer? Like, like if you don't have $400 for an emergency, you shouldn't be playing Warhammer.
Shouldn't be and aren't doing it are two totally different things.
Right.
It's true. Like, there are people still, hiring me for commissions and stuff, while nobody's making money right now. But it is a lot slower than it normally would be, I think. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And I think it's the same for, like, just like you said, you played Magic the Gathering, so I know you've seen guys that'll spend their last $20 on Magic cards.
Oh yeah.
And it's that escapism, right? So they're doing the grind, they're going to work, they're taking care of the kids and school or housework, whatever they got to do, and then having that just a little bit of money to spend on something that makes them happy. Some people do it with fast food, right? They eat to make themselves feel better, or junk food. I eat chocolate like crazy, but everybody has that something, or at least most people do. I think everybody does. And for some people, that thing is Warhammer models, or
Mine's bottles of paint. I now have 2 full sets of Pro Acryl, and I couldn't tell you why, except for I didn't want to have mishmashed bottles. Awesome.
There's even more off screen you can't see, but
sure.
Yeah, I've been collecting them for years. I just like to buy hobby things. I guess that's my thing too.
It's the dopamine, man. Every time you get something new to play with, I'm just like, oh yeah, give it to me. Have you found a brand of paint that you like better than others? Are you just kind of a painting agnostic? You like it all?
I like most of it. I won't say I like it all, but I like everything that's on my desk right now. And there's Games Workshop, there's Pro Acryl, Scale 75, P3, Model Color, and Game Color. Got some Dark Star metallic paints that I actually won in a painting contest, and I've just started playing with them. And my good friend Matt DePietro's got me into using these artist acrylic paints, and they're super thick and they're super vibrant, but they can be like thinned down to a glaze if I need them. So I painted like my Creature Caster competition piece. I used exclusively the Pro Acryl paints, or no, I didn't. The artist acrylic paints.
Right.
And also my, I've got some inks up there, and I'm just using Amsterdam inks. I picked up at Hobby Lobby just because it's close to me. But
Sure.
my competition piece for Warfare Weekend, I used only primary colored ink and black and white paint, and that was it.
Really? That's really impressive because those had a lot of like really amazing like depth and shade that you had going on there. All of your skin tones were beautiful. Your non-metallic metals were beautiful. Like that I didn't realize that those were all inks.
My work in progress pictures is just like, in the shadows we'll just put blue ink, and then in the highlights we'll put yellow ink, and then in the midtone we'll put red ink, and that's how I started them. And then I just added more and more white paint to each mix, and then blended them together, and I just kept working up. So there's actually no black paint in the skins at all. It's just primary colored inks and white paint. And I only started desaturating things with black paint when I was painting like the cloth, the loincloths, and the weapons and the stone, just to make them look different, because I felt like everything was kind of the same.
Yeah, well, I mean, they looked really great, and I loved your little display pin for your group. Like that. I'd never seen one of those like in person, to where you could like take them out and still play with them, but like it felt it felt right, which was really cool. Yeah, no, this makes sense. The layout of it was cool. I was very impressed by that.
Okay, so I've had those models for 3 years or so, and when I first got them, I built real slate on the base, and I just glued them to their gaming bases with some slate, and they sat on my shelf forever and ever. And I was like, I know eventually I'll have a plan for them. I just don't know what it is. Maybe it'll be for D&D or whatever. And then when I started trying to mix flesh colors on my own and painting with inks, I just decided they were going to be an experiment. So I started experimenting on those models, and it started going really well. And at some point I realized, like, oh, I think I'm onto something here. Like I was really happy with the way it was going, and Warfare Weekend was like a week away, and I was like, I think I'm gonna have to get these done. And then when I got them done, I was like, I was supposed to be packing to leave the next day, and I was like, I need a display base for these to really set them off. I built that thing in 2 hours.
What?
Dude, I think that's including a trip to Hobby Lobby to grab the piece of trim that I used for a base.
That's impressive, man. I mean, that I think that there just kind of describes like sometimes overthinking it is like the enemy of getting like really cool stuff done, because it looked awesome. I remember walking in and being like, because your pieces were already in the case before mine, and I was like, oh shit, look at that. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it was like all of the processes involved in building that base were things that I've done before. I don't know if you've seen, I built like a swamp with a Dracodile, and I built a water base with a Sea King on it using some similar like display plinths. And so it was all stuff that I had done before, and I knew all the steps that needed to be done. So I just did it without thinking.
Just did it. Wow.
It worked. Yeah.
It turned out great, man. Well, I definitely look forward to actually like talking with you this time in person, instead of just like I said, I think in chat, I think that the only time that you and I really interacted was I was sitting at the paint table. I was listening to Mr. Bungle because I just needed to like paint and be like chilled out. And then you were like, have you seen a guy in a Chewbacca costume? I was like, yeah. What? And some guy in a Chewbacca costume commissioned you to like do a couple of models for him the night before, and like how do you run into that person again?
Well, the problem was I had helped him with his PayPal on his phone, And he was like, yeah, just half up front and half when the model's done. And I was like, it'll be done tomorrow. Like, no problem. And I helped him with his PayPal. And so I didn't check my phone to make sure that it went through because I was like, yeah, he got it. It's good. And then when the time came, I didn't have his name or anything because the payment didn't come through. So not only I didn't have any of the money and I didn't have any of his contact information. So then I was like, great, now I'm stuck looking for a guy in a fuzzy hat. But he found it, luckily, so it all worked out.
That's too fun. Well, and I love that about that, you know, it was so small and connected. If something like that happened at Gen Con, you'd probably never run into him again, you know, with 70,000 people there.
That'd be rough. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I'll let you get on with the rest of your day. But Kevin, thank you so much for stopping and talking with me today. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure getting to meet you and hear about your story. Do you have anything that you want to add at the end of this to send people to your pages or any grandstanding statements?
Thanks for having me. You know, I was interested in doing a podcast like this, but I wanted to just reach out and say hi. You were friends with my friend, and I wanted to let you know that I appreciated what you were doing. I did listen to, like, the interview with Nicole was the first one I listened to, and it was great. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. It's KeFa Paint Studios everywhere, and it's KeFa. It's just the first two letters of my first name and my last name. I thought it was clever, you know, a long time ago, and now that's me forever. So.
Yep, there it is. You know, every time I see that, I always want to say it's Kefka from Final Fantasy VI. And it's not Kefka.
That's why I loved it so much when I came up with it, is because I was like, it sounds like Kefka, and that guy's the shit.
It's easily the most villainous bad guy.
We're fighting over the TV playing this Final Fantasy VII remaster right now, and it's amazing. It's spectacular. Maybe the best game I've played, like Final Fantasy game ever.
Really? Wow, that's good to hear. I'm on the fence about going back to it right now, mainly because I don't want another thing to throw 40 hours into, and I hear that that's just what you do. So I'm going back and I'm playing like Hyper Light Drifter and, you know, things of that nature right now, and that's been a good release.
Yeah. I guess if I wanted to add anything, it's just that I encourage everyone all the time to just support artists in any way that you can. So if you're not capable of like getting a commission or buying an artist's piece or something, share their work. You know, like you said, what did you say? Blast the broadcast? What did you say?
Boost the signal. That's a Sam Lindsism. Boost the signal.
Yeah. Just try to do that for as many artists as I can. If you see something great, share it, comment on it. We all know that these algorithms got us by the balls, you know. So we've got to do what we can to support each other. So if you see something good, like it, comment on it, share it. You know, tell a friend, tag somebody. And just I want everybody. Man, we could talk all day because for real, I'm about to go down a rabbit hole here. All right. There are a couple of camps of people. Like when you get into the business side of painting miniatures, there's some people that have like a famine mentality where they feel like they constantly have to protect their piece of the pie. You know, like there's not enough room for everybody. Like they're super secretive, etc. I'm the total opposite. There's enough pie for everybody. Everybody can get as much as they want, and that's why I think by boosting and encouraging other artists and making connections, you know, even like this connection I'm making with you, I have no idea how this could benefit me business-wise in the future, but it probably will. You know what I mean?
I get you.
So I think that the more we all work together and prop each other up and shout each other's names and show each other's work, it's all to the good. So I think that's the message that I want to get out there.
Dude, I'm so with you, 100% on everything you just said. And it's something that like I have always been that way, and I'm always shocked at how closed off people are to that. And I'm like, man, I'm telling you, there is no into this well. It is vast and it is deep. And if you pretend like it's finite, your career will be finite. Where if you pretend and understand that creativity is like a cosmic gift, you know, it is something that we can all pull from if we want it, and there's enough to go around. All it's going to do is make us all better. And yeah, that famine mentality is so demoralizing to be around. So I appreciate you being the same way. And Kevin, man, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
For having me, man. It's been a real pleasure.
Good, man. Good. Well, I'll catch you hopefully on a Twitch stream soon once your computer starts functioning the way you want it to.
Look at that. I don't know if it'll do what I tell it to do, so I'll try it. I don't know.
Like I said, if anything, your cell phone will do a good job. I have tested it out. It's about the only thing that I've been able to have any sort of luck with here in the basement.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you again soon.
All right, sounds great, man. Take it easy.
You.
Thank you for watching another episode of Hobby Time in the Murder Basement. I so appreciate your support. If you could go ahead and give this video a like, subscribe to my channel, share it with your friends, leave a comment, literally do anything that you can to help get this channel a little bit more traction. I'd really appreciate it. I hate when channels ask every single episode for this. It becomes mundane and monotonous. So I figured I'd just record one of these. That way you only have to hear me do this once, just at the end of every one of my videos. I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next video.